Universities are not normal. This university isn't normal. We're unlike any other type of organisation responding to the climate crisis. Our responsibilities and our potential mean that our response to the climate emergency must go way beyond that of most other organisations that are concerned only with their own role as producers and consumers of carbon. Our response to the climate emergency, our climate emergency strategy, was approved by our governing body in November, and the approach we are taking is underpinned by the expertise and insight of our Academy for Sustainable Futures that we're here to launch today. Our response represents our ambition to maximise our contribution to tackling the climate emergency, drawing on our responsibilities as a values-led Church of England foundation and our potential as an educator, as a knowledge producer and broker, as an anchor institution in our region. We've committed to this in words by signing the Global Climate Emergency Letter, committing to achieving net zero by 2050 at the latest, but in deeds by already reducing our direct emissions by more than half in the last decade, as the Vice-Chancellor said, which ranks us 13th for low direct emissions among the UK's 102 large multi-faculty universities. But now we wish to look significantly beyond our own emissions to explore how we can maximise our impact. Our first decision is that we will not offset the blue circle in this diagram. That is, we will not take the easy option of paying others, often in less developed and more vulnerable parts of the world, to deal with a problem we are responsible for, and we, as a society at least, have created. However, our direct emissions, the red circle in this diagram, comprise less than 20% of the emissions in our value chain. The remaining 80% relates to the actions of others stimulated by university operations. This includes, for example, the commuting of our students and staff, and most significantly, our procurement. By insetting these activities, the bottom left yellow circle, we will take responsibility for our full value chain and develop processes, policies and approaches to reduce these emissions as part of our journey to net zero. However, by far, our greatest potential to tackle the climate emergency is through the influence of our education, our research and our advocacy, in providing the skills, knowledge and evidence for the local, regional, national and international economy and community to reduce emissions. This is the top right yellow circle. That's not to say we'll divert focus from our direct emissions, not least because we need to be able to model behaviours. As others have said, we need to say not do as we say, but rather do as we do. Nevertheless, to illustrate potential, if we were to reduce our direct emissions, which now total only 4,000 tonnes of CO2 equivalent, this would only have an effect equal to every car in the UK reducing its annual mileage by only half a mile. Conversely, if we were able to deploy our influence through our graduates, 3,000 of whom find employment in the regional economy every year, and through our research and our advocacy to support just 8 in every 1,000 micro businesses in Kent, that's those employing less than 10 people, to do as we do and switch to a renewable energy tariff, that would have the same impact as reducing our direct emissions to zero. And if we were able to increase that influence, to persuade just 5% of those micro businesses in Kent to make that switch, this would be the equivalent to eradicating carbon throughout our entire value chain. Our response to the climate emergency, therefore, is an ambitious undertaking that seeks to leverage our unique potential as a values-led, regionally anchored knowledge producer, broker and educator. This is what's necessary to maximise our impact on the climate emergency. We will not, parochially and puritanically, focus on only the impact of our direct emissions. We will embrace our wider responsibilities and potential to focus our effort on where our impact will be greatest. To do this, we will most immediately focus on 3 areas. First, we will thoroughly examine how carbon is produced in our value chain, particularly through procurement and commuting, and set targets for reduction that will challenge both the university and our wider community, stakeholders and suppliers. Second, we will continue to reduce our own direct emissions, focusing particularly on our buildings and facilities. Third, and most important, as we build our next university strategic framework, we will ensure that we, one, develop the climate advocates of the future through embedding sustainability education in our curriculum, and two, develop evidence for climate policy and practice that can support the type of longitudinal systems change at scale necessary to effect societal behavioural and attitudinal change. We've already halved our direct emissions. We're in the leading group of large multi-faculty universities for low direct emissions. But it's not enough. Our response to the climate emergency now sets our sights higher and wider. Our ambition is to significantly exceed the target that was set by our commitment in the Climate Accord letter to reach net zero by 2050. We wish to both exceed net zero by having an impact that far exceeds our own emissions, and to do so far earlier than 2050. This is our formative pledge to future generations of the university's students, staff, and stakeholders. This formative future generations pledge will be extended and refined as we develop the university's new strategic framework in this, our Diamond Jubilee year. So as we celebrate our 60th university, our pledge to future generations will come to form part of our commitment to 2030, to 2050, and for our next 60 years and beyond.